So let us pray. Silent prayer. Amen. So just to give a simplistic summary of what I was able to cover in all the classes that I've taught this subject. So the first thing, we went to the book of Daniel 8:13. And just to highlight the most important points that we were able to see from that story, we were able to see that verse 13 is dealing with the concept of two desolating powers. So, and we were also able to see in the explanation, that is from verse 16, 17, 18, we were able to see as we speak of these two desolating powers, which is the daily desolation and the transgression of desolation. So we were able to see that these two desolating powers are going to give the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot. So there's another concept that we were able to see based on last Sabbath's class. And this is the idea of two indignations. So what we saw, I will draw a line here. And what we saw here is that there is the first end of indignation, and there is the last end of indignation. So then we were able to see that based on the question, how long shall these two power give the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? Based on the understanding of the Millerites, they were able to go to the book of Leviticus 26, verse 18, and this is when they understood the time, the duration, because it gives the concept of 7 times, which is equivalent to 20 years. So if there are two indignation and you have the time frame, then you can also know the beginning and the end. So we also are able to understand the concept of the two livers. That is, we were able to compare Daniel 8 and Daniel chapter 12. So the story of Daniel 8, this is the story of river what? For those who remember. So this is the vision of the two rivers. It's an interesting concept that you find in the time of BM magazine. And this vision of the two rivers, we were able to see a lot of similarities in these stories. So number one, when you come to Daniel 8, whatever is happening to Daniel is happening at the banks of a river. So one is Ulai, and the other one is what? So that's the first characteristic we saw. Then we also saw that there is a conversation, and in both we have two saints. Two saints in a conversation. So one and another, and they have a questionnaire, a question and a response is given. Then in both, we also saw that whatever they are talking about is a message of time. So these are the characteristics that we saw when we bring these two verses together. And we also spoke of Daniel's experience. What we call the Mara experience. So, and we saw that the main focus of Daniel 8, this one, as much as it's also dealing with this question, 8, and I'm going to put stroke 9, will teach us more about the 2300 days. That's the focus of that story. Though there are some bits that will also deal with this other time prophecy. But when we went to Daniel 12, we saw more of the concept of the two desolating powers. And I'm just going to say 25:20 because it's going to speak of the persecution or the treading underfoot of the host. More so, it's going to give us the perspective of a power called a he. And this he is going to scatter the power of the holy people for how long? For how long? For a time, times, and what? And a half a time, which is equivalent to what? 1260. So, and because Daniel will not understand, more explanations will be given and more time prophecies will be given for Daniel to understand, because what the angel said here, I will only help you understand what shall be the what? The end of the indignation. So the focus is on the end point. So that's what we were able to cover. And we were also able to see that the whole story of Daniel 11 to 12 is the story of the daily. It's going to focus right from Daniel 11, the history of Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. So this entirely is what we call the daily, pagan powers. Though it's also going to speak of the purple horn, because, and this is the transgression of desolation. So I'm going to emphasize more on this part. So when you go to Daniel 11, and I'm going to quote a few verses. I want us to see verse 33, 35, and 36. I think I didn't put this, but I'm going to do it. 33, 35, and verse 36 of Daniel 11. So this is Daniel 11. They are going to put more emphasis on the transgression of desolation. So the entire of Daniel 11, by the time you come to 33, I know for those who understand that history, it's going to deal with these powers, which we call the day. And then we're also going to put some emphasis on this. So I would want us to go there. Maybe someone can read for me. So as someone is reading, I just want us to see that verse 33 and verse 35, what we are going to have is a repeat and enlarge. So the same story that is in verse 33 is the same story that is in verse 34. So someone can read for me.
Verse 33 says, and they that understand among us shall instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword, and by blame, by captivity, and by spoil many days.
35.
And some of them of understanding shall fall, try them, and to purge, and to make them wise, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for an appointed, because it is yet for a time appointed.
Yeah, so when you go to verse 30 and 31, this is the transition point from pagan Rome to Papal Rome. I'm not going to focus on that. And I just want us to see when you come to verse 33, it speaks of a people, and these people are called what? And they that understand among the people. So, and I want us to see the first part here, This is verse 33. The first part is they that understand. So there are people called they that understand. And they that understand, what will they do? They have a work to do. What is their work? Their work is to instruct many. So you tell me what story is this in another verse in the book of Daniel. So there is a people of understanding and they are instructing many. And then the verse continues to say, and yet they shall fall by the sword, by flame, and by captivity. As much as they are instructing many, they have a problem. They shall fall by the sword, by famine, and captivity. And they are doing this, the verse says, for how long? And then the verse says, many days. So there are people of understanding whose their main job description is to instruct many, but they have a fate. They are going to fall by the sword many days. Can you see that? Now let's go to verse 35. When you read verse 35, what does the verse say? And some of them of what? So I hope you can see understanding, a people of understanding. But here there is a mix of the words because it's not so much aligned, but you can just do it for yourself. 35 says, and some of them of understanding shall fall. So instead of instruct, the first is shall fall, but I'm going to rearrange it and say shall fall comes here. And then it says, to try them and to purge and to make them white. And that characteristics to try, purge, and make white is to instruct many. And then the verse says, even to the time of the end. So, and then it gives the perspective of time. So this is an aspect of time. And this one is also, and it speaks even the time of the end. So this just gives the duration. It's many days. And this one tells us up to when. It's the time of the end. So then, because it is yet for an appointed time. So all this work of falling or being killed by the sword or being taken captive is a period that is going to take many days. And I really hope you can connect what are the many days here, because what are the many days in our story? It's this period. So you can see that these people of the understanding, I would suggest, is the host. It's God's people. They have a work to do to instruct many, to make people white. But the verse tells us that they have a fate awaiting them to fall or to be killed by the sword. And it's going to take us to the time of the end. So the other verse I wanted us to see is verse 36. And 36 speaks of a king. And this king, so this is now verse 36, speaks of the king. And this king has a characteristic. What is his work? He's going to do according to his will. He shall exalt himself, magnify himself above God, speak marvelous things against God of gods, and he is going to prosper. So there is this king, and there is a period in which he is going to magnify himself against God. He is also going to speak marvelous things against God. And the verse tells us that he's going to do all that work till the indignation he accomplished. For that is determined shall be done. So he's going to do this until when? Until the indignation is accomplished. Then the verse ends with that determined shall be what? Shall be done. So, and I'm suggesting this is just a repeat of the same concept. The entire period when these people are being persecuted, we have this king who is magnifying himself against God. If you want to know more, you can take this story to Daniel 7 and see of that little horn, or the story of Revelation 13, and see of the beast that speaks marvelously against God. It all ends up to this power, the transgression of desolation, which is the purple power. And then it says that all that is going to take place until the indignation be accomplished. I hope you still remember that the reason why these two powers are desolating God's people, or they are destroying the sanctuary and the host, sorry, it's because of the indignation. They are under punishment from God. Are we together? And the verse is saying he's going to do that until that punishment is accomplished. And then the verse says, and that determined shall be done. So I want to ask a question. What is determined? What is determined? You're smiling. You have an idea.
I don't know what there's a determination for the destruction of this power. This is away from those people. Yeah, this common sense determination of destruction after the accomplishment of destroying God's people. There is that definition of that power to be destroyed.
Where do you get that from?
I remember can we about the little one?
You can take us there. So I'm asking, what is determined? It's a familiar verse. Yes, Festus? To cut. What is being cut? Yes? Desolation. Why desolation? Where do you get that from? So this is the story of Daniel chapter 9, 26 and 20 what? So remember, once when we were dealing with the 2300 days, and I just want us to see the story of Daniel chapter 9, 26 and 27. So this is how I understand the way you would understand those verses. They look so complex if you just treat them without realizing that there is a concept of, again, repeat and enlarge in those verses. So what you need to do is to align verse 26 and verse 27. And what you will see is that verse 26 has a part A, a part B, and a part what? Part C. 27 has the same. So, and when you look at part A, this one, it's more dealing with the 2300 time prophecy. But when you come to these two, this is what is dealing with the two desolating powers. So you need to be able to see that for you to understand part B of 26, it is repeated in part B of 27, part C of 26, part C of 27. And this phrase, proof texting it, that determined shall be done. Remember, we are dealing with the two desolating powers. It's two familiar subjects, but they are connected. So when you go here, and I would ask us to go there, you will see that in Daniel chapter 9, verse 26, part A speaks of the 62 weeks. After 62 weeks, shall the Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. That is part A, where part A ends. And you need to understand that portion is connected with verse 27. Because when you read 27 part A, it says, he shall so it says after 16 those weeks, after 62 weeks shall the Messiah be cut off. But he tells you before the Messiah is cut off, part A of 27 tells you that he shall confirm the covenant with you for how many weeks? 1 week. And it is in the midst of the week that he shall cause the sacrifices and the ceremonies to cease, the oblations. This causing sacrifices and ceremonies to cease is equivalent to the Messiah being cut off, because this is 31 AD, and the death of Christ signifies the end of these sacrificial systems. Are we together? So you need to connect those two verses for you to understand. And I'm saying, so you need to understand that now when you go to the next part, B and B are telling us the same story. So let's go to 26B and also read 27B. So 26 says, and the people of the prince. So I'm going to subdivide this story like this. And I'm going to say 26B speaks about the people of the prince. And what are the people of the prince coming to do? What are they destroying? They are destroying the city and the what? So the sanctuary and the host. The city is equivalent to the host. So can you see? There is the people of the prince and they are coming to destroy the sanctuary. Remember the story. How long shall they take to destroy the what? The host and the sanctuary. Can you really see the same story? The people of the prince shall come and destroy the city and the sanctuary. Now go to 27. What does 27 say? 27b tells you, why are they destroying the city and the sanctuary? Because of what? For overspreading of abominations. And then it says, he, who is the he? Now be careful, who is the he? The prince. He shall make it desolate. So the it is the city and the sanctuary desolate. The people of the prince are coming to destroy the city. So connect that with 27b. This one is this one, but because it's repeated and enlarged, it gives you the reason why they are destroying, because of the overspreading of the abominations. So if you want to know the story well, this is the story of 70 AD. And this is taking place 70 AD because the city and the sanctuary, the Jewish kingdom, even after Christ causes the sacrifices and the oblations to cease, what will they continue doing? In the same thing. And because of those abominations, even after everything has been nailed on the cross, they will not listen. Now, the prince, will be sent to come and make the city what? Desolate. So let's go to 27, part C. Let's begin with 26. So this one is now 26, part C. And it's the same. 27, part C. So part B will deal with the day, and part C will deal with the what? With the transgression of desolation. So you need to understand the verses are just like that. So let's read 26, part C. It says, and the end thereof. So it speaks and the end. So remember there was a conversation. Someone wants to understand the end. Do you remember Daniel asking, when is the end? Now the verse tells you that the end is with what? The end shall be with the what? It speaks of a flood. And this is interesting Because when we speak of the flood and we want to understand about the flood, where do we go to? Where do we go to? 12, 6, and 14. So you need to understand the flood. And maybe I will go there first to save time, to know what this flood is being spoken here is all about. So Revelation 12 speaks of, I would subdivide Revelation chapter 12 in 3 parts. From verse 1 to verse 5, and then from verse 6 to verse 12, and then from verse 13 to 17. 1 to 5, 6, 12, then 13 to 17. The 3 parts. So the first part takes us to a snapshot of what the great of what is happening in heaven. There was a war in heaven between the dragon and the what? And Michael. And then this war ends in heaven and it changes the environment. It comes on earth. So from verse 6 tells us the dragon having war. I mean, it tells us of after the war in heaven, how the war comes to the earth and it becomes a war between the dragon and the woman. So when you read verse 6, it tells us that the woman is going to flee into the wilderness where she has a place prepared for her for how long? 1,203 score day. 1260. Verse 14. Verse 7. Verse 6 is the same as verse 14. Because as the dragon tries to devour the woman, what will the story tell us? Verse 13 tells us when the dragon saw that he was cast into the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man's child. But the woman receives 2 wings of a great eagle that she might fly into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared and nourished for a time and half a time from the face of the serpent. And the serpent cast out his mouth, water as a flood. This is the serpent casting water as the flood after the earth, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood. But the earth will help the woman. So this is the story of the dragon casting flood, which is persecution. And this flood is being cast while the woman is in the what? In the wilderness. And in the period of the wilderness, she is going to stay there for how long? So when the verse says the end shall be with the flood, what is the flood connected to? This is the period of the transgression of desolation, which is the period of the 1260. I hope you can see that. Then when you come to part C, it tells us, back to Daniel 9, it tells us, and that is what I think, forgetting your name. Yes? Maitia was trying to quote, and what Sabina was trying to say. So when you go to the next part, it says, and for the, even until the consummation. This one says, even until the consummation. Then the verse says, and that determined shall be poured upon the what? So I did finish reading 26c. Let's go back there. It says, and the end shall be with the flood, and unto the end of the war, what are determined? So this verse says, desolations are determined. So by the time you come to the end of the war, desolations are determined. And you need to know that that determined shall be poured. And what is determined? Desolation. And now this is where the problem was. Just to clarify, according to the verse, it takes us back to our last problem, the verse says, shall be poured upon the what? Now, what did we used to do? We used to go to the margin, right? And when you go to the margin, what does the margin say? No. The margin changes from desolate and puts what? Desolator. And so the mindset was, if you use the margin, these are two different things. Because who is the desolate? That determines shall be poured upon the desolate. Who is being desolated? I'm going to say this is the city and the sanctuary. I'm going to say this is God's kingdom. But when you put desolator, who is the desolator? It's the oppressor. Can you really see that? It's not God's kingdom. And so this tells you that desolation is determined upon who? The desolating power. And maybe you'd say this is to be the papacy, because it's the history of the flag. So when you go to the margin, a different result. When you stick to the verse, it still makes sense. And I think this was the exercise we were trying to say last time. Before you even rush to maybe supplied words or the margin, first stick to the verse. Though you're going to see that it does no harm, because what the pioneers understand, they're the ones who had this mindset to go to the margin. Because when you come to this waymark here, you're actually going to see desolation is upon the papacy, the desolator, but the verse intention is to tell you that desolation is upon the what? The desolate. So both of them helps you to understand that both powers will have a desolation. After God uses this power to punish his people, at the end of it all, God will eventually punish the same power. So desolation is also determined upon the desolator. But if you stick to the verse theme and storyline was focusing on who? Not the desolator, but who? The city and the host. So you need to stick to this. But this does no harm also. And that's what I was saying. You need to realize those supplied things, because the marginal reference is also kind of a better tool, which is according to them, they give a synonymous word for whatever it's there. You'll actually see that sometimes they give you two different meanings, and you need to understand which do you buy, which do you stick to. Unfortunately for this one, on both cases, you can have a better argument. So the point I wanted us to see is that when you come to Daniel 9, it still gives you the same perspective. So you know, 70 AD, what is happening? It is the story of the daily, the destruction of Jerusalem by this power, pagan Rome. It's a snapshot of the daily. So we know that it begins with Medo-Persia, but Daniel 9 is more focusing on the last power, which is Rome, the purple, and it's the work of Rome to destroy the city. It's the same story. I think you can do a lot of proof text. It's a broad subject, because when you start coming to this story, it links you to the story of Christ. And this is Luke and Matthew. And what is Christ saying? When you therefore shall see what? Yes? Let's go there. Luke 21:24. And it's also in Matthew 24:15. Someone can read Luke, another one can read Matthew. So Luke 21:24. I'll read that. Someone else will read for me Matthew. So this is the story of, it's a conversation between Christ and his disciples. It's after Christ has cast the temple and said, do you see this temple? It's this story. not a stone shall stand upon another. And these people, the disciples, want to know when that shall be. So they are going to come with questions. Tell us. Because in their mindset, they understand if the temple would be destroyed, it depicts the end of the world. They don't see a world that could exist without the Jewish kingdom and their temple. So they think if that temple will be destroyed with its own magnificence, it probably depicts the second coming of Christ and the end of the world. But they have a problem. They don't know when that will be. So they are inquiring of Christ. Tell us, give us a hint. And actually Christ will tell them. Though this is not the end of the world, is not actually to take place in their dispensation. But Christ will touch on the same stone. And that is verse 20 where it says, and when you shall therefore see, and when you shall see Jerusalem encompassed with armies, then know that desolations thereof are what? So what is Christ saying? When the soldiers come, when you see armies, what sign do the armies depict? Desolations. The stories about desolations. Know that desolations are nigh. Therefore, so then, let them which be Judea flee to the mountains, let them which are in the midst of depart out, and let them not that are in the countries enter therein. For this be the days of vengeance. So this, whatever is happening here, Christ is saying they are the days of what? For this be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written be fulfilled. So, and then the verse says, but all to them that are with child, and to them that give suck, in those days, for there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon these people. So this is God's wrath upon these people. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. So what is Christ saying? That Jerusalem, what will happen to Jerusalem? Shall be trodden down of who? Of the Gentiles. And then Christ says, until the times of the what? The times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. What are the times of the Gentiles? It's this one. It's the 1260. Remember, each has 1260, the two desolating powers. So the first one is times of the Gentiles. And Jerusalem finds himself on the same mix. They are going to be trodden down of the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. So this is a confirmation of this, and it's the confirmation of this. The daily and the transgression of desolation, they are going to trod underfoot the sanctuary and the host. And this story of Daniel 9 is this story here. Someone else can read Matthew. Yes.
When you therefore have seen the abomination of desolation spoken of by the Lord the prophet, stand in the wilderness.
So when you shall see the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel, yes,
Stand in the wilderness.
yes,
Whosoever did that, 16, let them which be in Judea flee and into the north. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take any good of his house.
yeah, that's okay. And you would go and see, if you take another story of the times of the Gentiles, it takes you to Revelation 12:1, because John is told to measure the court, but the outer court, leave it, because the outer court is left for the Gentiles to train for how long? 42 months. It is equivalent to 1260. So you can go to many verses and many, and they are all going to confirm the same story. I think, yes? Revelation? It's, yeah, 11, not 12. So you can go to many verses, and I think we have many confirmations. So this is a very good proof. Remember, Adventists do not agree with this understanding. But can you really see how the Bible is clear? Everywhere you go, you see it speaks about the Gentiles. It speaks about both the daily and the transgression of desolation. Two desolating powers whose work is to bring desolations to the sanctuary and the host, to God's people. And in another language, this is punishment. This is the same story that you find in the story of the churches. This is church Thyatira. God punishing this church because they have allowed Jezebel to come and teach them and do all those kind of things. So I hope, I don't know whether anyone has a question based on all this. What we saw as the concluding thought was that if you combine what we saw as Miller's work and if we combine what we saw as Miller's work and Edison's work, so this is 723 and this is 1844. So, and then we have 677 here. And then we have 1798. So what we saw, William Miller will deal with the history of Judah, and we saw Edison will deal with the history of Ephraim. And what we saw is that both of them tend to disagree with each other. Because Edison says, I am the one who is right, Miller is wrong. Miller says, this is what I understand as the concept of the two desolating powers. And I think I was able to draw the structures. And I say, by having all this and understanding the concept of the two desolating powers, what we eventually come to a realization by combining their works is that these two prophecies, when you merge them together, what they end up giving you is a chiastic structure. Because we are going to understand, based on what Edison tries to deal with, he's going to go to the book of Isaiah chapter 8, where this prophecy is given. And from Isaiah chapter 8, Isaiah will tell us about the captivity of both houses. And when Isaiah is giving us this prophecy, where does Isaiah stand in history? 742. And Isaiah says, within 65 years, Ephraim shall not be a people. But it didn't take 65 years. It only took how many years? 19 years, and Ephraim is taken captive. Later, because the house of Judah did also believe, they are also going to be taken captive after 46 years. So when you combine this prophecy together, what you will see is a 46 and a 46 and 19. And when you mirror, you see that if this is 19 years, at the end here, what should they have seen? 19 years. And this is how they should have been able to establish 1863 as a significant waymark. So the 2520 was to bring out and project this waymark, a very significant waymark in the Millerite history. But they didn't come to this because they didn't harmonize between Edison and Miller, who is right. But when we pick their work and combine the two, we see what they missed to see. I think that's what I want to do. I want to switch to something else. This was just a review of what we have been doing.
If we go next slide, I'd ask a question about the answer to that question of Daniel 8:13. And currently I have some thoughts with that, trying to respond a story with a general question. And it could look like, I don't know if we call it could look like a rejection to pioneer understanding or what we understand for a long time. But what I think is subject to correction. I think that is the answer. I think to the 300 years is the answer to that question, not 25 years. The primary answer. And I from that point appears as to um, the position that we have taken for a long time is question. But I think unless I can accuse that angel who was answering or things like strawman or answering a wrong answer. If you ask someone something and then they give you an answer, which is different answer, then I have a right to accuse that person that maybe you do not understand me or you can explain yourself better, okay? But I think, despite that, I think the Trinitarian here is the longest professor, and I think that's that question of how long shall be this vision, that vision is the vision spoken in that chapter, and that chapter begins a vision of Medopasha. And Medopasha, that is where Trinitarian years begins. So the question is asking how long shall be the trampling down of God's people, of course, in what we understand as daily and this. And we are taking the daily as a specific portion which is reckoned from when the vision is given. That point. And then the angel is saying, when the 300 years end, then there shall be a reaction of this action. There shall be a cleansing, the sanctuary and all things. So it's, the angel is answering actually that question recently, giving you the ending point as 1844 of is giving you that it's not that giving is not okay. What we understand is like the answer is 25, 20, but the angel is substituting the 300. I'm saying like the angel is like saying, how long shall this house stand when the house is standing? And then you tell someone, and 5 o'clock is where we will intervene to see my motor sound. So that's actually the angel is saying that. So he's saying 1844 is where this the trampling ends, switching back to infantry ending there by application. So I agree by application, but primarily what the Indian is answering is the desolating power covered from where we are talking about its fusion, which is both 57 and its Medo-Persia, leaving Babylon and Assyria aside first, and giving you a time period where Medo-Persia and specifically verses 12 is talking about Rome, by the way, two faces. That's what we talk about where the daily is spoken of. So mostly what those the interest of Daniel and all that is actually pagan Rome and Bible Rome, which is covered by 23 and not paganism would become before Medo-Persia. So in my understanding, I think that is that answer. And what we call 25 is application and an external answer, which is not the primary intention of that. That paper.
So I don't know whether I got you well because I was also distracted. I didn't want to stop you, but maybe we can take the same thoughts in Q&A because I got a bit distracted. I didn't follow up what you were saying. Yes, Linda, the last person, then I continue.
In 2 lines, what I would say is the answer is 300 and not 25, 20, the third question. And the reason is the question is asking when the fission begins. And when the fission begins, if you are praying, is Medo-Persia, not Assyria. Something like that, at least. But reckoning that trampling of this power ends in 1844 and giving you hope that there is an effect of that cause, which is cleansing of that.
Can we do that during Q&A? Because I think that was one of the questions last week
Okay,
that we didn't deal with.
okay. We can do it, Kelly.
How about are you trying to what desolate the in this class, we're trying to tell us that it's okay, both of them, regardless of what is meant about what can be happening.
I think I said, based on my story, the verse is desolate. But I gave them old understanding we used to have. How instead of relying on the verse and the word, we used to go to the margin. And I'm saying that was seemed to be not the right methodology to use. You need to use the word desolate. There is a reason why the Bible says desolate. And then I say, but when you go to the desolator, you actually see that the argument we used to give focused on the desolator and not the desolate. But we can also understand this is a pioneer understanding actually. It's not us who did that. The pioneers would go to the margin because Miller used the margin of reference. And the case they would argue was that desolation is upon the desolator. But we are saying consistency with the story, the one who is being desolated is not the desolator, but it is the what? The city and the host who is the desolate. So I'm saying based on the story, I would stick to the desolate. But I also gave the old view that does not damage, but it gives you a different perspective. It's a different context of what I'm dealing with, which is now when you deal with the desolator, dealing with the marginal reference. But I'm saying that's not the best way to go about it. Sticking to the verse.
So then you're hapo chini na mtazamo you're comparing verse with verse 35 na verse 36 sama kuna part inasema some
The understanding. Some of them of understanding shall fall.
the other person is them they understand. So I'm asking, doesn't that word, you're the sound, are you can let any difference according to that word?
So when you say repeat and enlarge, it means you are giving, when you repeat the same concept, you might give a different perspective. So when it says they, I would say it says collectively, those of understanding. When it says now some, it means that not everyone will fall. So it means that not everyone fell of those of understanding. It says some. So one just says they of understanding, and the one says some. So it tells you that it's not everyone. So as you see that slight different, you actually need to show that for me it gives a deepened understanding that not everyone fell, it's only some fell.
Pointing out some of the thought to just
No. Yeah, I would agree with if that's the mindset you have, that one is telling us that not everyone fell, it's some. So there are others who actually, if I would take the biases of what Christ says, that if the days were not shortened, everyone would be destroyed. I tend to think the shortening of the days saved some.
yeah, alafu kwa yangu hiyo some italics.
Italics.
So like that to be supplied and
Yeah, if it's King James and it's italics, it's applied.
so then that means
The sentence can't make sense. Without,
Yes, I'm
the
saying.
sentence can't make sense without that word.
Yeah, I think Joy is saying the sentence won't make sense without that one. And I think we said last time, there are those applied words, but those applied words, not every supplied word is bad. They are there because they bring harmony in the verse. They bring that connection in the verse. And then I say, if the supplied words does no harm, but contributes more to the understanding of the verse, to me, I would buy that word. But if it actually becomes a contradictory one, that's where you begin to ask yourself, how do I go about it now? Do I still retain it? Do I discard it? And I think that's what I said. So for me, I don't see it doing any harm to the verse. It brings more clarity and understanding to the verse. So I think I also mentioned another perspective, and I spoke about the two perspectives of the daily. So when I get some other time, we look at other verses because I said there are around, actually I will begin with this. I said there are around 4 versions of the daily. And of the 4 versions that I spoke about, this was Daniel 8, 11, 8, 12, 8, 13, and 11, 31, and 12, 11. Yes. So I said these three will deal with the three horns. And then this one will deal with Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. Then this one will deal with the Visigoths. And this one will deal with the crown or the seat. And if you have that, then you know that how many days do we have? This would mark it 508. This would also mark 508. This one, I think it's forward. I forgot the year, but this one would mark it as 330 KB. So each day has a date. So when you just say 508, you need to know which date you are speaking. I forgot the Visigoths. I think it's 496. I'm not sure. I forgot the date. So with time, maybe I will have to look at the rest. For now, I want to focus on this and this. So I spoke of 4 versions of the daily, and then I spoke about the 2 perspectives. So, and I said, based on these days, when you speak of the 2 perspectives of the daily, I'm more focused on the term take away. Because when I speak of the daily being taken away, it would mean 2 different things. And you'll be able to see the meaning of this takeaway when you just go to the original meaning of this word. So I'll give an example. When you go to Daniel 8, this one, verse 11. Someone can read that for me.
Yeah, in magnify to in and by him, daily sacrifice was taken away.
So when you go to Daniel 8, you're going to see there is a he who is going to magnify himself. And I want us to see the word magnify, because the word magnify is page 1431. And magnify means gadal. And what magnify means is to become great. Then, after he magnified him, then when you read part B, and it says, the daily shall be what? Taken. And when you look at the meaning of that takeaway, it has its root meaning from the word magnify. It's H7311. That is when we use the code name for when we're using my sword or any other online concordance that you have. And that takeaway is the word room. And what room means is to rise, exalt, magnify, or to lift up. So there is a close connection between these 2 words. Gadal and room means that magnification. So you need to ask yourself, if the verse says that the daily shall be what? Taken away, and then I replace the word take away, it would mean the daily shall be lifted and exalted. Can you really see that? So what does that actually means? Because the other meaning of the daily is what you will see in these other parts. That is Daniel 11:31 and 12:11. Because this one speaks about the same word, take away. And this taken away has the root H5493. And we used to understand this to be the word su. And what this actually means is what I would say is the immediate thing that comes into our minds when we think about something to take away. This is to remove, This is to pluck or to turn aside. So the daily shall be removed. So with these two perspectives, we need to understand that when we speak of the daily being taken away, one takeaway is to lift and exalt. Another takeaway is to do what? To remove. Are we together? So when I say, when you see what we are saying, that in the Sunday law history, something was taken away. We need to understand that takeaway in these two perspectives. And we can only understand them when we come to this story. So when you come to this first part here, 8:11, it speaks of exalting. The daily is exalted. When we speak of the Visigoths, you're going to see that the daily here is removed. Or when you speak of the three horns, it's removed. So this is what we need to understand, that as we speak of the daily being taken away, there are four versions and there are two perspectives. And you can see the two perspectives in the four versions. So, and the reason why I'm telling us this is because we need to realize when Elder Terry makes the application that we have a daily today that has to be taken away, then she's speaking in this perspective because she's going to apply the daily to what? For those who have watched. She's going to apply the daily to what? To the Republican Party. Are we together? So you wonder, if you have this understanding, you're having a conflict of mind, how Republican Party is removed. Yet we know the Republican Party existed and continues to do what? To exist. What we need to solve is ask ourselves, how is the Republican Party exalted or becoming great? Because in that capacity, when he says the Republican Party is the daily, it's in this perspective. Then someone else will come and say, by the way, the daily will be taken away. And in the application or in the story, the person wants you to see is that that daily is this. Something has to give way. Something has to be removed. Something has to fall away first for something else to be established. So you also need to see that it is not this, but actually this. And I think my purpose was to take us first through the basic understanding of the daily, be able to understand all these versions for us to be able to see the application being made. Are we together? Because for now, we are seeing that the daily is being used to represent one, the three arms of the government. Number two, the daily is being used to represent the Republican Party. And number three, the daily is being used to represent the sixth kingdom, which is USA. So in all these applications, we need to be able to understand at what perspective is the daily this, or this, or this. And for you to be able to understand this is to realize it's these versions that have been used to make applications of this. Are we together? So I took you through this one to understand. And I want to take you through another for you to understand how these three horns that are plucked, because it's these three horns that are plucked that actually represents the three arms of the government. So you need to be able to understand the history of the three horns and how each horn represents each arm. Are we together? For you to see how the daily is taken away in our dispensation. You also need to understand when the Republican Party here is referred to the daily, it's like this seat. What the Republican Party will give to Trump is that crown. It's the same story that is in Daniel 11. So you need to understand the history of Rome. This one, for you to understand more about the Republican Party. And more so, you need to understand this overturning of kingdoms from one to another. After Rome, the daily is taken away. What is set up is Papa Rome. And you are going to see, through understanding this history, the daily is these pagan powers that are taken who restrain the rise of this kingdom. We would say this is the fifth kingdom of Bible prophecy. And then you will see after the fifth kingdom, what are you going to have? The sixth kingdom of Bible prophecy. And so the sixth kingdom has to be taken out of the way for who to rise to power? The seventh kingdom. So all these arguments are correct, but you need to be able to argue out in what perspective. So how many minutes? 5. So maybe I can establish something before time is up. So I want us to go to the history of Acts 27. And in the history of Acts 27, we spoke of Cilicia and we spoke of Pamphylia. What this actually meant is to overthrow and as something is being overthrown, there is the rise of a nation made up of every tribe. And so what we used to see is a pattern like this. So what we are seeing is the rise of the 7 as the 6 is being overthrown. So that's the story of Acts 27. And then this story is going to deal with the history at the end. Because when you go to the history of Daniel 11, verse 40, it's actually going to give us the same pattern. It's going to tell us, so this is 2021, this is the way Mark Sunday looked. This is 1989, and you will see the same perspective. Daniel 11:40 will tell us that we have this history here, 1798 and 1989. And you are going to see that these two waymarks have what we call same properties. And when you realize that these two waymarks have same properties, what do you do to that line? You cut it. And when you cut it, you overlay the two histories, 1798 over 1989. And then you're going to see the same properties. Here, we are coming to the end of an empire. And what kingdom is coming to an end? 6. And what, sorry, 5. And what kingdom is rising to power? So the same thing here, 1989, this power that rose, remember it's here, so it's progression, and then you can cut and have typology. 6th kingdom rising, but 89, 6 comes to an end. And so what you need to see, is the rise of the 7th. And so this story is going to teach us about the beginning of this transition. This one is teaching us about the end. So from 1989, you can begin to see the rise of the 7th and the downfall of the 6th. It's the two stories. One is dealing with the end, one is dealing with the beginning. So I hope this is familiar with us for now. And another concept I want us to see is that the history of the churches, how many churches do we have? Is the same as the history of the what? I'm going to put these kingdoms. How many kingdoms do we have? 4 in Daniel, 3 in Revelation. And what you see for the churches is that the history of the churches, I'm just going to say both histories are going to give an overlap. So let's take an example, 4 BC to 34. You can give another waymark. What we see from 4 BC is the progressive decline of the 7th church. And what we see from 4 BC is the progressive rise of the first church. This is church Ephesus. Right from John the Baptist, doing baptismal work, into a new church. And then you see the progressive decline of the Jewish church, which has the same characteristics as the church Laodicea. So you can see that overlap. Not that the Jewish church ends and then Ephesus begins. They have this overlap. So I would see the same for the kingdoms. So you see the same overlap. When you speak of the fifth and the fourth and the fifth kingdom, and you also see the same when you speak of the sixth and the seventh kingdom. So pagan Rome begins to decline in power, and what begins to rise in power? Papal Rome. The same thing. The sixth kingdom begins to decline in power as the seventh kingdom begins to rise in power. So there is a close connection. If you see, this is Rome, pagan, and this connection, this is USA. So this is the purple horn, and this is, I'm going to say USA as a dragon. So if you have this pattern, you can actually learn that you can learn many lessons from the fourth kingdom to this sixth kingdom here. You can learn many lessons from the fifth kingdom to this kingdom here. Actually, what prophecy marks is that this death is this resurrection. In one perspective, the fifth kingdom that is wounded to death comes back as the seventh. That's one perspective of the story. This kingdom has to be taken out of the way for this one to be established. This kingdom has to be taken out of the way for this one to be established. So the next time we'll have a class, we will pick from here. I want us to go to the history of pagan Rome and see lessons that we can learn about the sixth kingdom, and come to this history of Papa Rome and see lessons that we can learn from this kingdom. Because what we have here is the man of sin, the abomination that maketh desolate. And what we need to realize here in the history of the seven is a repeat of that. The man of sin, the abomination that maketh desolate. So it's the same pattern. I wish we had time, but I know my time is up. So we will stop there and then we'll pick from here in our next class. So we can pray. Thank you, Lord, for this wonderful moment. We are grateful for reviewing our past histories. We always say that the most disappointing thing is to forget how you have always led us, is to forget our histories, our past experiences. As we go back to repair the breaches, we ask that you may guide us, you may help us to navigate our way through these histories in the right way, for us to be able to see what is actually happening today. I pray for everyone here, continue guiding us in this hour of the latter rain. Shower us and equip us better to stand in the coming hour of trial. Be with us until the end of today's classes. I pray this in Jesus' name.